Three, two, one.
Hello, welcome back to the Godfo Universe podcast. This is your host, Josh Adams, co-creator of the Godfo Universe. I'm here with the other creator, probably the smarter and better of the two of us, Dan Evans.
Yeah, I'm the one doing all the work, drawing everything right now, right?
Nah, but you're the writer, man.
Yeah, that means
You're
that,
the
that
you're
means I
the
just ride the artist into success.
But yeah, we got an awesome topic today. We got a couple of things kind of to grease the wheels, so to speak, to get into this topic. But we are going to be talking about 1984. If you were listening to the last episode, we discussed this new kind of feminist revision of it called
A
Julia.
Femavision.
Uh, but we're going to go back into the original novel and kind of do a book club here, which I mean, I'll let Dan kind of fill y'all in a little bit more on how that's going to be done, what that's going to look like. But definitely wanting to dive into that book. But before that, you had a couple of other things you were wanting to bring up. So explain some of what's going on in the world of Dan's miserable life.
That's my favorite MTV late night show, Dan's Miserable Life.
Dude, that'd be a hit. I'd watch it.
It's just so...
I do watch it. I watch it every day.
Hey, man, I got a cold and I ended up pooping my pants. It's just like, just text you.
I'm your only subscriber to your life.
You don't even pay.
I don't.
It's a only Dan's. Man, it started. We were talking about 1984 in passing, and then like this happened literally yesterday. I took my daughter.
My daughter. I
took my daughter to the bookstore. She's a toddler. I won't give her exact age, even though I probably already have. But below 5. And we're reading like a Pete the Cat, but we always go there and she always picks out like 6 Pete the Cat books to read because that's her favorite thing ever. Which I feel like
there are that many Pete the Cat books.
Dude, there's like a million of Pete the Cat books. And
really, I did not know that.
And I keep thinking they're new, but I just discovered another old one.
I did not know that. I don't know why I thought there was just the one.
They're like Billy Joel records. You just keep finding them. Like,
it's just the same book every time, but
man, his fans will.
No, that's AC/DC records.
Well, like Pete the Cat is funny because like it looks like a child drew it. Like I feel like I could have drawn that. Like I'm a terrible writer and drawer and terrible artist. But anyway, so we're reading that, and like the lady comes over, the kind of like ladies that read books to like library kids. They always get like this.
What kind of ladies are that, Dan?
They always get like this kind of energy. Like they're always happy.
Just jittery and joyful.
Yeah, like, hey guys, we're gonna do the they just love their job, jerks. They're happy, fulfilled with their life. They found purpose. They have this electricity about them, and
that's called Parkinson's, Dan.
She's like, my husband makes $80,000 a year, so I can read books to children. So anyway, she comes over and she's like, hey, we're reading at 11. We're reading the kids' books at 11. We're having story time. You guys should be here. And we are here. And it's like 10:56. Like I think if I ran towards the exit, I'd still hear the intro. So we're like, okay, so I like talk her down. I'm like, okay, like let's let's go put Pete back and we'll do this. It'll be fun. And she's like, no, Pete, like I want to read Pete, like so.
Pete the Cat, dude.
Yeah, so I get her up.
I want to listen to this broad.
She's like putting out a cigar.
On you,
yeah,
on your forehead.
I wasn't born with freckles, so, I'm holding her, and she already isn't feeling it, and we're standing around all these like other little kids, and like I said, these are like 3 or 4 year olds, right? So keep that in mind. So I got to pull the book up while I'm talking about it because it's so awful. So we gather around for story time. What's it called? And they show us the book, and I'm like, oh god, this is like not gonna be good. And because I was trying to pretend interested, like, can you show us the book, like what it is, and my kid's already kind of hungry, so it's not going well. So they sit down and they're like, all right, kids, today we're going to be reading. And they turn the book over, and it's called Classified: The Secret Career of Mary Golda Ross, Cherokee Aerospace Engineer. So,
3 and 4-year-olds.
yeah, I'm going to pull it up so people can see it. So,
happened to the Bernstein Bears?
you try to correct it. I thought it was Berenstein. What happened to Ben Stein's Bears?
Ben Stein's Bears. It's pronounced Frankenstein.
All right, there. I put it up on the screen for everybody. So the cover already looks like bona fide most boring thing that any child has ever seen ever.
Super generic cover.
Yeah, for those who are just listening, it's a woman, I guess from the 20s, who knows, standing there holding like a ruler or some kind of compacted abacus or something, and 2 books. And behind her are blueprints for like war bombers and stuff. And it's in really bad colors, like really generic modern comic kind of colors. So
yeah, it's pretty awful.
It's apparently about this woman, Mary Golda Ross, who they had to say was a Cherokee aerospace engineer, which that's just weird. Be like, hey, Dan, Welsh Irish podcast and comic writer. But here's some more of the pictures, everybody. Like, it's the most boring square layout with long sentences. And the woman's reading it, and she's like so enthusiastic about it. And it's, of course, it's like, it's kind of what we discussed about. It's got a feminist overtone. It's like, Mary Golda Ross, which is the most Cherokee name I've ever heard, right? She wanted to be a mathematician in the war for some reason, and like, men didn't like her being there. So it's got this whole thing with it. So of course it's men trying to keep her out of, I guess, aeronauticals, which is the most manly field to study.
She can't come in here with her wampums and her gigantic teepee and try to tell us how to make an airplane. The red man ain't never made anything what could fly.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly how it went down. Yeah. So, first of all,
she's trying to count coup on us and scalp us.
I'm sure that's exactly how it went in like 1920 or whenever it was. And to be fair, more power to the lady. It's apparently real person. I'm sure she was brilliant. I'm sure she contributed great things, more better than my moronic butt could have. But it's just, but I'm not laughing just at the book. I am laughing that someone would think to write that book as a kid's book. That's what I'm laughing at is, first of all, who wrote it as a kid's book? And secondly, who thought to read it to like toddlers? So 2 pages in, my daughter's like not having it. She's like, this is not Pete. Like this is not the anthropomorphic cat skateboarding and surfing.
Pete wasn't Cherokee.
He's Siamese. She's like, this isn't an anthropomorphic blue cat that skateboards and like eats pizza. I don't know what this is.
It should be. So say we all.
So it was just a funny experience it happened. But then like when you walk around the bookstore, especially the kids section, it's just kind of full of this stuff, which is nothing.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of that mess. Well, even when I was teaching, like our library, and God bless our little librarians in these little country schools trying to fill up their shelves. Like I get that they're a lot of that stuff comes just, they get shipped, books from wherever, Scholastic, wherever. But man, you go through the book fair and there's hardly anything that's cool, man. Like I remember book fairs as a kid having all the cool monster books. You had Goosebumps and all. I mean, there were so many cool books about dinosaurs and not everything. Even for the little kids, it's all virtue signaling and just boring stuff that looks terrible. They'll take old books that had awesome covers
Yeah.
and reprint them with lazy, boring
Yeah,
covers.
that
I've
stock
never understood that.
that stock Microsoft looking art.
I've
Yeah.
never understood why you would take something that had like a painted actual artwork for an awesome, dope cover and put some stupid, lazy clip art looking cover on it.
Yeah.
Unbelievable to me.
Now, and I'll get to it, but like first of all, like I'm not gonna do a whole breakdown, but like more power to this woman. She was one of the 40 founding engineers of the Skunk Works project. I that broke up. I didn't hear what you said.
Engine ears. Oh gosh!
You just let the intrusive thoughts win for real.
I usually do, man.
Skunk Works project while at Lockheed Corporation, which I guess became Lockheed Martin. So I guess they're to blame for the complete destruction of our society in future. But yeah, like more power to her. She was like a legit genius. She like enrolled at college at like 15 or 16. It was the first Native American to get a certification.
I can't imagine how hard it was for her in that time period to do that. Like that is valid. Yeah. That's a really cool.
She was born in 1908.
Thing. It's just not a that's not a children's book though. That's
a
middle schooler.
It's the most boring thing I've ever heard. It was like reading like Ben Stein's life narrated and written by Ben Stein. So like why would you
I
read,
was a young
that's like a book
girl.
you would read to like 8 to 12-year-old girls who were interested in that, and more power to you. But it had this weird feminist angle to it, and it was all about like how men didn't want it. It was the middle of World War II. I really don't think they were very picky. We had an entire Native American division, didn't we? Of like the Wind Talkers. We had African American divisions for the first time. I forgot their official battalion, but they were like awesome at it.
And we had
the Red Tails.
And back
that
home,
was in World War One.
Back home the women were stepping up and
working
doing
factories.
all the hard stuff.
Yeah,
because the men were out there shot at.
Yeah, but anyway, it was that weird feminist angle that it was just strange.
It's like the Captain Marvel.
Yeah, men are bad. And that's what I want my 3-year-old daughter to learn. Men are bad, right? But yeah, there's just so many books, like a whole wall of them that have that kind of stuff on it, or they'll have books about like political figures, and it's not like political figures of the past. It's not like Martin Luther King. It's like the ones that are still living, or like Ruth Bader Ginsburg or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's like it's just weird. That's almost like that's a cult of personality, strange thing. I don't want my kid reading like a George H.W. Bush biography.
Well,
like 5.
You bring that up, but like as kids, I don't remember there being books. And maybe there were, but I don't remember any books about like Reagan and Clinton and George Bush Sr. when I was a kid.
I was reading about snakes every time.
Right, like it was. I don't remember anything marketed towards me that was political or any of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If anything, there were books about our founding fathers and Abraham Lincoln.
There might be like
stuff like that,
George Washington biography,
historical figures. But I don't ever remember books about, like, if you had a book about someone who was a current person, it was like Bo Jackson or some sports figure, right?
That'd be cool.
Bo knows books. No, he don't.
He only knows to run to the top right of the screen and glitch in. That was a Tecmo Bowl reference for anybody under the age of 38.
But man, it's a weird time we live in when we look at the media and what the media is trying to feed kids. It's not just in the books. I mean, it's in their TV shows. It's in all these YouTube channels because they consume enormous amounts. Yeah, they consume enormous amounts of video, like from YouTube, TikTok, those kinds of things. And those creators,
content creators,
regurgitators. pretty much. But like there's a constructed version of the past and the present that is being shoved down our kids' throats, and a lot of people aren't even aware that it's there because they just because that's the babysitter. Just turn on your tablet and shut up. Leave
Well,
daddy alone.
I remember even as a kid noticing the nihilism of the '90s in
Oh
TV
yeah,
and movies,
it was
and my
there.
dad was smart enough, of course, to point it out and stuff, and he didn't appreciate it, and he made good points
Mm-hmm.
about it. And he explained it to me as like a kid, and it made sense. And
Mm-hmm.
but I mean that's been there for so long, especially when you look at. I mean, we talked about this before that like before like 1950 there was the term teenager didn't exist.
Yeah.
Like that's a whole thing with that, like separation of like childhood and adulthood and adolescence. There's no rite of passage anymore. They just extend adolescence forever. But
Mm-hmm.
um, so this next topic, this happened like this week. I was wondering why I kept seeing like weird videos going around of people complaining about like their homeschooling or whatever. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it turns out it was because John Oliver. I just call him not John Stewart. Did a special whatever when he has one of those stupid long art things he does that's not even funny because the man's never had a funny bone in his body. He did a special on like how homeschooling, how awful it is, and it seems to have come directly from this Washington Post article called "Homeschooling's Rise from Fringe to Fastest Growing Form of Education." And of
Well, it
course,
looks
like
like it was on HBO.
yeah, but I'm saying I think it came from this Washington Post article because like everything he quotes
I gotcha.
basically comes from this article, and which I use the term article loosely. Um, of course, the title, the headline's already loaded with the word fringe, which that's supposed
Mm-hmm.
to spark fear into the hearts and
Far
minds of
right.
it. Yeah, when you hear
Yeah.
fringe, it's supposed to make you think that someone's crazy or something. But
Mm-hmm.
it's basically just, if I had to sum it up, basically fear mongering about people not wanting their kids in public school, and that's I mean, on the plus side because I don't. I mean, I'm going to homeschool my kids. Right now, they're in a different kind of school. I'm not going to say the name or type or anything like that. But they're not in public school, and they're not going to ever be in public school.
Yeah, for
But I don't
real.
have like any money invested in homeschooling and that kind of stuff. Like I don't have a horse in this race, except that regardless of any outcome, I'm going to homeschool my children, one way or another. But it's just fear mongering. It's basically like this idea of like, only evil parents do it because they want to indoctrinate their children. It's like, man, when the entire media complex is preaching one thing, and TikTok is preaching one thing, and YouTube's preaching one thing, and all these things are all teaching one thing, and the current political power is preaching one thing. That's indoctrination, my dude. And
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. And when parents have enough care and love their children enough to say, you know what, I'm pulling my kids out of this stream of consciousness garbage because I don't want this to be what they, in that period of their life where they're formulating their views, their world views, this is not what I want them to be getting filled up with.
yeah, man,
More power to those parents,
you've
man.
been a public school teacher, and I've worked in
I
education in
have
different
17
ways.
years, man.
Yeah, I've done it in several ways, and I've worked in private education in certain ways. And I was the child of two educators for like 30, 40 years. They were in it. I am better qualified to teach my child than teachers are. like,
Well, to say, I worked with a lot of wonderful teachers, but the reality is the stuff that's being pushed through public education and so many, especially, well, initially it was middle school and high school. Now it is going into a lot of the elementary schools, not as much here in the South, but it's coming. But the types of things that teachers should be able to teach well is math, reading, all that stuff, all this
yeah,
ideology
and if you're
stuff. That's not a teacher's place
if your
to.
kid can't read by like the age of 6, they're not going to learn from a teacher.
No, you're right.
Yeah, sorry,
Well,
that's
and
just
but
something
no,
that's
you're
a
right.
fact. Yeah,
You're right. And the reality is those teachers are being handed stuff, curriculums that they have to teach, and they're not qualified to teach children to explore their gender identity and their psychology. They're not
yeah,
psychologists. They're not doctors. They're not psychiatrists. They're not equipped for that, and yet they're being told this is what you have to teach if you want to continue getting a job, getting a
Yeah.
paycheck.
Well, and
And that's just, it's ridiculous.
in public school, it's designed to cater to the lowest common denominator child, especially when was it Bush put through No Child Left
No
Behind.
child left behind.
Your
Yep.
your child, even if they're not a genius, if they're here, they're being taught at the level of this kid,
Yep.
and that's
I mean,
it doesn't
granted, we
matter
have
who.
gifted and talented
Yeah.
programs,
For
and we have
now.
stuff to try to,
For,
yeah, for now, to try to balance that out. But no, you're correct.
yeah, and well, the argument is always something like, well, there are really bad parents. Like, well, there's really bad teachers. Like, and I mean, everything that can be pushed like against that can be pushed against it. And he goes, of course, John Oliver shows the most extremes. And what's funny is he can only find like 3 really extreme cases for in his entire segment that's super long. And it's like, man, if this was an epidemic, it would already be taken care of. It's not. It's way like I don't know. I almost can't think of any environment. I'm sure you can, or any right now accepted environment that's worse for children than a public school. It's not a good place. It's not a good place for kids. Like, it's almost like a small prison for children.
Mm-hmm.
The way it's designed.
And again, I taught for 17 years, and I loved those years. There's good and bad in all of it. But you're right. That whole idea of being a child, having to sit in a chair for that long and listen for that long, for hours upon hours upon hours. They already were on a bus, some of them for 2 hours, haven't had breakfast. Their bus is late, so they still didn't get breakfast. Even though we have free breakfast, they didn't have a chance to eat it. And then they got to sit through class. And if they talk, if they wiggle, they get fussed at.
They got to deal with other kids.
They got to deal with all these other kids driving them crazy and bothering them, pushing them around, all this stuff. And then, at the end of the day, we load them down with homework, which I don't believe in homework. I think if they can do it in the classroom, they can do it. And if they can pass the test, they can do it. And if they need remedial work, then that's fine. But this idea of like, you got to do this same type of problem 80 times today when you get home. If they can do it twice, they don't need to do it 80 times. If the school is where they should learn, not home. Home should be where they can be home. So they got all this homework, and then they're going to ride on that bus for another 2 hours before some of them even get home. I mean, it's not an ideal setting for a child to learn. It really is not.
It's institutionalization.
And I say that as a teacher, that's just not nothing about it is intuitive to how children learn.
Well, I noticed it in myself. Like, it's a reason I had a problem with like a lot of churches, and a reason I have a problem with like a lot of jobs. And I was like, I kept telling myself, it feels like school. It feels like school. It feels like, and I like, well, what do I mean by that? And it's like, well, it feels like institutionalization.
Yeah. And the boss, you trade your teacher in for the boss that still will talk to you as a grown adult, talk to you like you're a 4th grader.
And
it's all soul crushing. It's all designed to make you fall in line and do what everyone expects you to do. And you should be happy to be here. Like, you should be thankful for the opportunity I'm giving you. And like, nah, bro, I just want to check.
Well, and I'm not even talking like artistically and your child being a free spirit. It's like, first of all, your child does need to be a kid. And the reason is, in the educational system, children learn best when they're having fun. Children learn best when they have their own pace. Children learn best when they can explore things, when they can get up and they can move. If you want kids to learn, school is the worst place for them to learn. If you want kids to memorize, school might be an okay place, but that's usually going to be typically females.
Well, and you see, like, to give you an example, and I don't want to chase this rabbit for too long, but I'll give you an example.
Well, we're out of shape, so we can't.
We had a program for several years, and I think there's still a version of it out right now, but it was called Read to Succeed. And it was all about fluency. And they brought the special area teachers in because, obviously there's not enough money to actually hire someone to do this, and it's to be on top
Well,
of the reading lessons that they're already getting in class.
That's because the bureaucrats are taking the money.
Exactly. But they put us in this classroom with small groups a few times a week, and it was all about reading as quickly as possible, pronouncing the sounds and reading as fast as possible. It was all about fluency.
Mm-hmm.
And they were super jazzed if the kids could score really high with really great fluency. And I would kept saying, like, this is such a bad program.
Yeah.
Because these kids, they can say these words, but they have no idea what they read. They are retaining none of it. They don't understand any of it. Yeah, they're fluent. They're fast.
Yeah, parrot can
they
be
have
fluent.
no idea. Yeah, they have no idea what they read.
Mm-hmm.
And the second year that that we were implementing that, I was pretty vocal about how I felt about the program, and I got called to the office and fussed at and all this. Who cares? But a few years later, move on to something else. And that's the other thing. The State Department pushes a new program in, and they implement it, and then like 2-3 years later, it's gone. Here's another program. Mm-hmm. Here's another program. It's this constant revolving door of programs.
Whatever lobbyists can convince them to fund that year.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And that program will come through, and then you give it 5 years. 10 years, you'll see the same program come around again, just with a new name.
Yep.
And the best thing that anyone could do would be burn that State Department of Education to the ground and let teachers actually teach.
Minecraft, just to cover our. You didn't call for any actual
insurrection
in Minecraft.
That's the best thing you can do is get government out of schools.
Yeah, get government out of everything, and I think it'll be better.
Exactly. Yeah, get government out of everything.
No, and that's a problem that's been going back. I don't think most people. It's like everything. You have people like you do have really good teachers. But I don't think teachers are heroes. We've been told teachers and then nurses are heroes. Whatever new topic comes around.
I think they're the heroes you say they are, then pay them.
I think firefighters are heroes. So let's go with that. I think that's somebody. No one hates firefighters. There's never a defund the firefighter movement. That never happens. So no, I don't think you're a teacher just because you didn't know what to graduate in, so you chose like education. Because I've met teachers and I've met like people who were going to be teachers, and these people should not be teaching these people shouldn't be teaching dogs, much less children. But a lot of them get through, and that's the worst part. And then they usually get a rude awakening because so many of the people I've seen go into education went to like private school or like Christian school, and then they get put in public school for the first time, and they're like, "Whoa, I don't know how to deal with this."
Yeah,
and it's funny to watch, but it's a
make it a year or two, and then that's it.
Yeah,
and then
that's terrible for the kids. But I honestly can't think of anything worse. You can think of worse things, but like that's publicly sanctioned right now than to put a kid in a classroom for 8 hours a day, and you're stealing their life. That's what I mean. I've actually had to this is a first world problem, of course, because I didn't have to work in the salt mines and die at 13. But like I get mad for it because I'm like, they stole like 12 years of my life, if not more.
Yeah.
And going back to homeschooling, like, man, it is not natural in any time in human history for you to be separated from your family for 40 plus hours a week. At least both parents. Someone needs to be with the kids, because otherwise the government will be their kids' parents. And it doesn't matter what they believe or what you think or if you're against or for whatever the current administration is, whoever it is, they're just not yours.
Right.
Even if they're each other's at school, that's not natural. It is not natural for children to raise themselves, or for some like teacher or principal or government to raise your kids. And that's what's happening when you leave your kid with someone for 12 to 15 years, 40 hours a week. That's insane. That's not your kid anymore.
Yeah, that's and it's producing a generation of very troubled people
Mm-hmm.
that really don't know how to handle anything that's not institutionalized.
Exactly. All it does is feed into the government. It makes the government feed itself. You breed people that are dependent on it.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever your political beliefs are, I don't care. But you have to think that that's not good for children.
No, it's not.
Yeah, they're just entering into like a religion, basically. It's
Mm-hmm.
like imagine how mad you might be if your kid were raised by the Catholic Church. If you're against the Catholic Church, now
Oh, and
stop.
it's even
Yeah,
more
stop for a
so.
second and think like the government's worse than that.
Well, it it's even worse because now we've got so many of these topics that are coming up in these classrooms. They they are telling the kids not to tell their parents what they're
Mm-hmm.
hearing. They're actively bringing kids and teaching them something. And if your parents don't like this, it's okay for you to just not tell them what we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
That's grooming. That's what your creepy uncle used to say before playing with you in a broom closet. Like
Mm-hmm. Anytime
it's
if you
not.
tell a child, don't tell your parents. That's a
That's
red
not
flag, man.
okay. That's not okay.
Yeah.
And then we have government leader, we have vice presidents and people who stand up and say things like, it is the job of it is our job as the government
Our
to
children.
protect our children from from
Mm-hmm.
their own parents.
Yeah, and I
Dude,
did see
that's
the
scary,
president.
man.
Let me get this quote right. I think it was the president that said like parents aren't the number one stakeholder of their children, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Fill that time while I look this up real quick.
Well, so I mean, that's the idea, though. Is if you don't look at children as actual people, and I know this is a separate issue because but the abortion issue and all the arguments over, is this a fetus, is that actually a person? If you can dehumanize children in the womb, then you can also dehumanize children in the classroom, because then you can
Mm-hmm.
say, well, this is a potential citizen that
Mm-hmm.
we want to be a reflection of the ideology of what this country is now.
A comrade.
Yeah, that's you're it's not a person, it's a comrade. It's a cog in that machine
Yeah.
that they're trying to build.
Well, that's what I noticed during like the riots and stuff of 2020 is people started using the language of bodies, and it's like
Yeah.
people aren't bodies, my dude.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. We
I
need
don't.
bodies in this on the street. We need
Yeah,
bodies to.
or they would be like, whatever color bodies, and it's like,
Yeah.
man, that's
Yeah.
that's degrading and dehumanizing, man. Like that's
But of course it
yeah,
is.
that's
That's the
horrific.
whole point. That's the whole point. And yeah, it's scary, man.
It
It's
was
scary, but that's why to go ahead and go with what you were going to say.
it wasn't the president, it was the Biden education secretary,
Okay.
Miguel Cardona. Somebody like she said something like parents should be. I think it's a she. I don't know. I'm not good with Spanish names or anything because I'm dumb. Um,
Because you went to public school.
that's it. I don't know the gender of this person. I don't mean that as a joke. I don't see where it says he or she or they or anything. And it's Miguel, so that I don't know if that's Miguel or Miguel. I don't know the ethnicity, so I can't tell you if that's male or female name because I'm stupid. I think it's male, but if it's the Secretary of Education, that I think it's a female.
Oh no, hey, it doesn't.
That's not a
really
very
matter.
masculine role, but anyway. um, they asked, do you think parents should be in charge of their children's education as the primary stakeholder? Cardona responded, I believe parents are important stakeholders, but I also believe educators have a role in determining educational programming. That's a grade A dodge.
Yeah.
So, long
Real.
story short, this person will not basically admit that parents are the primary stakeholder in their education. I think it should just stop at their parent. That's
Yeah.
Oh, their parent. There they go. That's it. So yeah, but anyway, the government has an incentive to be against homeschooling. That's less money.
Mm-hmm.
That's less children. That's less manpower. That's less everything that goes into it. The
It's
government,
less
yeah,
control.
that too. The government has no interest in people not being dependent on them.
Yeah.
That's just a sad fact. And John Oliver, sorry man, you're not Jon Stewart. You never will be. They got him like
Mm-mm.
Trevor Noah and whoever else. Like none of them were as funny as Jon Stewart. Like,
Nah.
but
Well, that's a perfect segue though into our first book club selection.
yeah, 1984. Um, one of the which of course, I mean, if here you want, you go ahead and give a an overview of it real quick while I gather my thoughts from that. I'm sorry.
Well, there's a good chance you probably had, if you're listening to this, you probably had to read 1984 at some point when you were in school, and probably haven't read it since then. But George Orwell, English author, he wrote this as initially, I believe he was in favor of socialism, right?
Yeah,
Like to some degree, and
pre war socialism.
yeah, pre-war socialism. But he saw combat. He was a journalist during World War II for the BBC. He saw Russia.
Mm-hmm.
He saw Soviet Russia. He saw uh, the Spanish side of everything and Spanish Civil War. A lot of that stuff really stuck with him, and in particular, propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea of a governing body controlling what you see, what you hear, what you read, and ultimately being able to control what you think so that they have a society that's entirely curated.
Yeah.
And then they can, and it's this idea of breaking down the individual. And so in the book, you have this governing body that's essentially an all-seeing eye. You're surveillance. There's surveillance all the time, and it's called Big Brother,
Mm-hmm.
and not to be confused with the stupid reality show.
Yeah, which came from yeah.
But it's ultimately a story about a few people who, a man and woman in particular, who begin to push back against that system and try to experience some of what they've been told are illegal activities, illegal thoughts. And if I'm not mistaken, this is, again, it's been a long time since I've read it, but this is where we get like phrases like thought police. Doesn't that come
Yep,
from?
thought police.
All right, yeah,
Double think, new
yeah,
speak.
double think, thought
Yeah,
police,
with it,
yeah.
and we'll get to it when we get to the actual. First of all, we're announcing that the next 3 to 4 podcasts are going to be 1984 book club. Now, in the
Mm-hmm.
future, we will continue to do book clubs, and we'll split them between this podcast and like that as an actual standalone thing. Due to trying to finish our current projects, we're making it one thing. But read along with us if you see this. The book is, I think, a little over 300 pages. If you read 20 pages a day for 3 weeks, you'll finish it.
Yeah, it's not a long
And it's in
book.
3 sections.
It's really
I think.
considering like, I mean, a lot of the books that are classic literature. It's actually a pretty easy read too. Like it's not
I was actually
super
gonna go into
dense.
that, which later, but to go with it. But first of all, yeah, he introduces like 4 concepts that are already brilliant, and he does it very
Mm-hmm.
quickly, and he does it very succinctly, and he explains it well. And that's what I was actually thinking today while I was reading it. For a classic book, especially for its time period, it is not. It completely avoids kind of the Updike and the
It's not Dickens.
you who wrote Ulysses? Was that Updike?
No.
Well, it avoids a lot of the pitfalls of like what modern classics have, which is density. James Joyce. It's not like James
James
Joyce and
Joyce,
who
yeah.
did As I Lay Dying.
Faulkner.
Yeah, it avoids a lot of the Faulkner kind of stuff and a lot of junk like that. Which there's a really good writers, of course, but that time period was very dense, I thought, and
Yeah, it's
very
not a navel
academic and
gazy. Yeah, it's the pacing. Like it
yeah.
moves. The narrative moves pretty. There are times when it slows down and addresses certain themes, but
Mm-hmm.
the story almost always picks right back up. So it's moving. It's not over like the way it's worded is not. It's not like
It's written for
Dickens where it
it's written
takes.
for the common man.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it really is, it's not a difficult read at all.
No.
But yeah, so, when we think about the story, you got Winston Smith. He's, part of the party. And really that's one of the
Everybody
other
is. Yeah.
phrases. Yeah, everybody's part of the party. If you live in Oceania, just like the kind of, I guess, the imagined Europe
Mm-hmm.
nation that they're all in. Um, if you're part of the party, you work for the party, and you're always being watched.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's one of the things, and I mentioned it to Dan earlier before we started. I think 1984 has a lot in common with, because it's a dystopian story, but just like even things by Alan Moore, like Watchmen, Who Watches the
Mm-hmm.
Watchmen, and especially his V for Vendetta,
Yeah, he clearly
you
was
know,
influenced greatly by Orwell.
and yeah, enormously influenced by Orwell. Orwell's one of those authors who,
He's well,
particularly
first.
for this book.
I feel not interject, but I feel like
No, you're good.
his books and his themes get all the praise. He is a magnificent writer, and
Yeah, he
we
is.
already
He is,
touched on
or
that
he was.
because yeah, because when you're reading it, some of it can get confusing for a half second because it's in a world that doesn't exist, and he's explaining
Yeah,
concepts that don't exist. But he does not talk to you like you're an idiot, and he doesn't talk to you like
right,
he doesn't talk down to you, and he's not pretentious. He writes like a journalist, a good journalist from back in the day. He's writing to the public. Yeah,
right.
objectively, even if it weren't for this book being so infamous, he is a good writer.
Well, and it's this one and Animal House, correct?
Animal
Not
Farm.
not
Animal,
Animal
he
Farm.
wrote
Animal
Animal,
House is
yeah, he wrote
Belushi.
he wrote Animal.
Jesus.
George Orwell's great work, Animal
Jeez.
House. Fat, drunk, and
Lord
stupid is
have
no way
mercy.
to go through life, son.
No, Animal Farm.
Animal
But I think
House.
1984 probably even more so is
Yeah.
is what he's known for. He's one of very few authors that just the tone and the mood of his
Oh,
works,
from the start. Yeah.
and you'll hear movies or books that come out, you'll hear people describe those things as Orwellian,
Mm-hmm.
in the same way that you hear like Lovecraftian
Mm-hmm.
with H.P. Lovecraft or Dickensian. There's not many other artists or writers that you hear those kinds of comparisons
Mm-hmm.
made. So I mean that tells you just how, even with just a small number of writings, how heavy of an impact Orwell has had
Yeah. Even if you just took those two.
on
Yeah.
literature. If there were no other books but those two, they have had an enormous impact on literature, on
Yeah.
science fiction. And he didn't create the dystopian,
He
you know,
perfected it.
setting, but he absolutely perfected it. And everything since him
Mm-hmm.
has been heavily influenced by him.
Well, and actually, when I had a small channel before, I'm gonna shut it down for different reasons, but I went into the history of dystopia, and I will probably do it again. Like to do it again with you and maybe Hans, Lore Master Hans. But first of all, the dystopian genre literally came out of socialism. People
Yeah.
saw it, and that's where it came from. And what's funny is the utopian writings came out of socialism before people tried socialism, and the dystopian writings were kind of a mockery of the utopian ideas because they
Mm-hmm.
saw what happened. And I forget the title is called We, and I can't ever pronounce the fellow's name, but I have it, and it was probably the first of that idea that critiqued the collectivist idea. People are just numbers; they don't have a name. Ayn Rand's Anthem came out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what people think about Ayn Rand. That book is actually really good, whether you agree with her objectivist weird philosophy or not. Um, and then it kept going from there, and people kind of compare Huxley and Orwell because they had two different visions of the future, and Huxley taught Orwell. And Huxley's Brave New World was more about how a totalitarian government would use pleasure to control people or
Mm-hmm.
lack of pain. And we see both of those in today's modern society. But none of those writers really captured the the human aspect better than Orwell, which again I think came from him actually participating in war and being
Right.
an actual
See,
reporter and
yeah,
an actual
seeing all of that stuff with his own eyes, and then I think also, you know, I think that 1984 left a bigger footprint than Brave
Mm-hmm.
New World, just because 1984, and not in every possible way, but in a lot of ways, was prescient. Like
Yeah.
there's so much that we see happening in our world today that it's so hard not to see the parallels.
Mm-hmm.
So 1984 keeps getting brought up, and even like we said in the last episode, even revised. Not that it needed it, but
Which is the
you
ultimate
know,
irony.
yeah. But you know, the idea of the power of a media controlled by the state or by the party, and everybody just stepping in line to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we see how dangerous it is in this book, but like it's playing out a lot of that stuff. And as we get into this book, I'm sure we're going to make a lot of points about that. But like it's impossible to read this book and not see glimpses of it in the
Mm-hmm.
world that we're living in today. It's impossible, and I don't know how much of that he really believed was going to
Well,
happen.
he saw it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't think he meant to
yeah,
be. I don't think he meant to be prophetic. I think he was just trying to be realistic,
yeah,
and it just
yeah,
happens to repeat. Um, yeah, that's the. I don't know, to continue praising Orwell, to give more of a preface before, so because we can save a lot of the other stuff for when we actually go into
yeah,
it.
yeah. For when we actually do the book.
Yeah, but he. I can't emphasize that enough. It starts with Winston, and it does. I
Yep.
remember reading it as a kid because we didn't read it in school. I think I was like 11 or 12, and it immediately just, you're in that headspace. You are where Winston is, and the way he writes, it's everyone's felt that way. I think if you
Mm-hmm.
have a single brain cell in your head, the way he writes of there's something wrong.
Yeah.
It keeps that tension throughout the entire book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and even I would recommend the movie too. I would highly
Yeah,
recommend the movie.
it's one of the most faithful book to film adaptations you'll ever find.
It's hard to
And
watch, but it's fantastic.
I think that the aesthetic that they landed on for that film,
hmm
like it perfectly captured the coldness of the book.
That's a good word, cold. And that's what's interesting too, is the way he, like I said, he writes very warm, kind of like a proto Stephen King, which is a pretentious
Mm-hmm.
term that I just used, but because there's a billion writers before Stephen King that were better than Stephen King at characters. But if I had to use that for modern comparisons for people, it's all about the characters. And
Yeah,
this, like, it's, you feel everything through Winston because the world is so cold.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's all just him observing a cold world and feeling it as a human being. Yeah. Um. So to give, Josh has did a great overview of it, but it's about Winston in this world and him, eh, not only defying Big Brother, because it's not a revolutionary book. It's not like what I almost said, To Kill a Mockingbird, but what's the Hunger Games. It's not like that.
right.
It's an
No,
antithesis to that. Actually, it's
it's
him.
the you can't possibly beat the
Yeah,
party.
and knowing within the first chapter, he knows that. He starts writing his
Yeah,
thoughts in the book, and knows. He says, "Thought crime is death." He knows it.
yeah.
Like, that's the whole thing. So I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it, but I mean, it's hard to spoil because it's more of just an experience, kind of like a play. It's kind of a Shakespearean play where even if you know the
Mm-hmm.
ending, you've just got to
It's a
go
tragedy.
through it. Yeah, we just got to go through it. That's the whole
Mm-hmm.
point of it. It's an experience within itself. It's one of the most cinematic books that you'll ever read. The
Mm-hmm.
way he writes.
There's the
Yeah,
imagery of it, and I think that more even so than probably the themes
yeah.
of the book, the imagery of the book has, like, without this book, there is no Philip K. Dick, there is no Blade Runner, there is
No
no
Neuromancer.
Snowpiercer, yeah, Neuromancer, any of that stuff. Without
There's probably no Matrix
1984,
and
yeah,
stuff
I
like
was
that.
about to
Yeah,
say there's no
a
Matrix.
lot of animes
Um,
out. Yeah,
yeah, this he really did. Like we said, he didn't create the dystopia, but he pretty well perfected it.
yeah.
And
He made
all
he
of
made it
that.
human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I look forward to. I don't want to dive into specific examples yet because I
Yeah,
look
yeah,
forward to
yeah.
unpacking that throughout the book. But man, there are images, and I read that book probably golly 25 years ago maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and there's images in that book that still like
Yeah.
vividly stick with me.
Yeah. This is probably my fourth time going through it, and I still find new things in it, and again how easy it is to read. Even when, like I said, within
Mm-hmm.
the first like chapter or two, he goes into here's a whole brand new world that's you never been in. Here's the entire philosophy of it. Here's everything, and it's simple to get through because it gets to the characters. He does
Mm-hmm.
not harp on things like a modern writer would carry those themes and drag it out and slowly reveal the world. He's like, bam, here it is. Let's get to people.
I would say that a big thing that he excelled at was just the economy of writing,
Mm-hmm.
and he never overwrites any of it, and
Oh,
I
you
think that
could
he
read
did a
Animal
good
Farm in an
job.
afternoon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and be profoundly affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think especially with this book, yeah, he establishes some things that don't exist, but the way he like thought crimes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty like the way he described. He didn't make up some ridiculous fantasy word
Yeah, it's
for
not.
it.
It's not a psychic thing.
Right, you can pretty well understand. Okay, I get where that's going. Like nothing that he creates, Big Brother, like all of that stuff is it's brilliant, but it's also intuitive. So it doesn't need him to sit down and have a glossary to explain what all these things are. They are new terms, but they are terms that make sense
Yep.
and don't like you don't really need any hand holding or like I said earlier, a glossary of terms to be able to dive into this book, which
He provides
nowadays
an appendix, but yeah, you don't need
he
it.
does. Yeah, you don't need it, but I think that there's a lot to be said for the economy and how well and I don't know how many editors he went through, but it seems like he was very good at editing himself,
That's what it
which
feels
a lot
like.
of
Yeah.
writers today are not good at doing.
Yeah. It feels very much like a man sat at a typewriter, knew what he was doing, and put it out. Like,
But it's
brr, brr,
lean.
brr.
It's
Yep.
a very lean book.
Yeah. And I would say this just because I try to be a moral person. Like, I wouldn't recommend it for probably like a kid under 13.
Mostly for the sexual content.
Yeah, it has some sexual content in it, and it's not gratuitous, but it's
No, it's
for the
not. It's
plot.
not.
It makes good. It's good for what it is. It's
Yeah, it's
necessary.
not raunchy. It's not
Yeah,
raunchy. It's not graphic, but it's heavy themes too. Like
yeah.
it's not
I wouldn't want someone to recommend it to my kid before I thought they were ready for it. So,
right.
but if you're of age, read along with it with us. Like I said, we're going to be doing probably each section. I mean, is your book like that? Mine is divided into three sections. It's like 1, 2, and 3, and it's got little chapters between them.
I downloaded it for Kindle, so I was going to open it, and read the first,
Okay,
read as far as I get
so
tonight.
every week we're doing basically about 120 pages, so you won't be too off. And there's no way to spoil it. Like really, like there's no twist. It's not kitschy.
It's not that kind of story.
Yeah. So we'll do that. I think, like I said, I think we should aim for 3 weeks. I don't want to drag it on forever. So join us with it, um, regardless of anything, because I know a lot of people don't read. And I don't mean that derogatorily. I love to read, and I barely have time to. I've got a stack of 15 books right there, and I don't have time to read them. I'm having to force time to read 1984, and I love it. So, but like I said, it's not hard. It's an easy way to get a copy of it. You can literally probably download it for free. Like you can probably search like 1984 PDF and get it for free. I mean, I could, if it wasn't illegal, I would just link it right here under the site. If you went to archive.org, which is a legal site, you could probably download it.
Or Gutenberg.
Yeah, or honestly watch the movie. I don't care. Watch the movie and follow along with us. But
Yeah.
yeah, whoever is interested in this, great. And like I said, this is the first one we're doing, so it'll be the main podcast. But as we go, we will split it into two. We will do a book that's a podcast unto itself. That's a book club, and then we'll do a topical podcast every week. But is anything you want to add to that? I mean, I can't. It's not an overrated book. I think that's the best way to put it. You can't overrate this book.
Yeah, I agree. It's a classic for a reason. I'm excited to get back into it and read it again. It's like I said, it's been a long time. I mean, I'm an avid reader. I read constantly, but like I haven't revisited this one, and I'm not sure exactly why I haven't. But I'm excited to go back and
Well,
to
it
read it
scars
with
you
fresh eyes.
in a good way. I mean,
I hope so.
it cuts you deep.
I
Like
hope so.
yeah,
I'm looking forward to it, man.
yeah. I would say that to anyone who hasn't read it. Like it will impact you. Like
Yeah,
you don't unread this book, and there's nothing.
yeah.
Like I said, there's nothing gratuitous in it, but it does. And
It's art. It's
yeah,
art always does that. Art creates a reaction, whether it's a positive one or a negative one.
yeah,
It's going to impact you.
and
Well, I do want us before we go ahead.
its impact on what we're doing can't be understated or
Yeah, and I'm sure
overstated. I
we'll
mean,
go
it can't be
into that
overstated.
some.
Yeah,
As we
yeah.
go through the book. We do want to say I'm excited. Dan's actually going to get to be face to face with me in the coming weeks, so
So
we're
he
going
can
to
hit
spend some
me.
time. Yeah, I'm gonna beat the heck out of him. No, I can't wait to
I'm
have
calling Spencer.
some. No, please don't. I can't wait to have him face to face so that we can really go through these last little bits of edits and stuff on the book, which means that by the time Thanksgiving rolls around, we'll already have that Kickstarter up and running, and you'll be able to pre-order this first volume of Apollyon 20XX, Live Not by Lies. Uh, I would say that there's a lot of dystopian influence in that story, and then what's coming after it. There's a lot of it in Kolga, which will be coming up soon. So if you like the dystopian vibe of 1984, well, so did we. So it had a lot to do with what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's coming out. We've got the Lamentations and all those things on our website.
Revelations are coming.
Revelations are coming up really soon. We got short film out now, some others coming.
Mm-hmm.
We got a ton of content headed your way. We've done some revamping on the website. It's getting cooler and cooler by the week.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time the book lands in your laps, it's going to be an awesome experience just to crawl through the website itself. We're trying to make it an absolute labyrinth of cool stuff.
Yeah, and we'll set up a Discord. We really want to build a cool community here. We want to do more than anyone else is doing in the fields that we're doing in novels, in comics, and short films. No one is going to do what we're doing, like bar none.
So if you haven't done it yet, or if this is the first time you've landed on our YouTube channel or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this, go to www.godfatheruniverse.com. Go up at the top, join our mailing list. We'll keep you in the loop of everything that's coming out, everything that we're up to. And man, it's about to be the year of the Godfather universe coming up next year. We got so much coming out. Man, I'm excited to roll all these things out. We've been working on this stuff for so long, perfecting it for so long that we can't wait for you to actually see it.
Yeah. So
we're ready to put your money where our mouth is.
Well, that's a good place to stop. But thanks for stopping by, guys. And next week, like I said, we'll see. Just come read with us. It'll be great. And then by the time that's done, we'll have our own book ready for you. So there you go. Peace.
Peace.